What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Actuali Podcast. I'm Chris.
I'm DJ.
And today we continue our weekly live stream series, Meaning Making 101, where we try to make sense of this world together so that we can be that change we wish to see in this world. We are changing the game from the inside out, changing ourselves to be that change we wish to see, fam. It's the only way we're going to get to where we want to go here and get that lasting peace that we seek. So thank you guys so much for being here. Today we've got something quite interesting. Some of you guys that have been with us for a while might remember when we were covering John Vervaeke's series, Awakening from the Meaning Crisis. John Vervaeke was picking up where a lot of guys like Jordan Hall, Jonathan Pageau, Bret Weinstein, and others have been working on since the 2000s. Initially, it started out as something called Game B, which was basically an alternative to the Game A mode of civilization that we are running right now, that we are in the midst of. We are in this Game A civilization, so to speak. Game B is an alternative mode that is attempting to answer the challenge of surmounting the multiple existential crises our species now faces, multiple existential crises that are compounding upon one another and building upon one another. So we have ourselves quite the challenge as a species. We're at a very interesting fork in the road. It feels like we're at some kind of apex where we get to choose which way we go forward as a species. Now, are we going to become self-sufficient and symbiotic enough with one another and our host planet to be able to become a spacefaring explorative species spreading life throughout the universe, or are we going to destroy ourselves before we even get off? I think that's the juncture that we are at right now. So the conversation today between Bret Weinstein, Jordan Hall, and Jonathan Pageau is something really exciting. Hey, what is up, Ninja Bat in the house? What's up, my brothers in arms, mentally speaking? Dig it. What's up, brother? Good to see you, man. Thank you for being here. How's life on your end?
I have arms.
Yeah, right. Yeah, what are you talking
Wait,
about?
brother in arms? That just means hugs, right?
I'm seeing a lot of hugs happening, man, nowadays. Even like, one of those clerks that's behind the protective glass as a cashier in some inner city, convenience mart. He loves dogging on and like getting the goat up. He likes teasing the different people that come in there. Some of these guys are really rough and tough. But he gets really generous with them too because his YouTube channel is popping off. He gave this one guy $1,000 today, and the young man was like, "Man, you gonna come out here and give me a hug or what?" And the guy goes out there, gives him a hug, and I'm like, "Man, there's so much wholesomeness happening in the world right now. I'm happy to see the pendulum swinging back. The course correction is occurring. We are calibrating, fam. Human species doesn't give up that easy. So exciting times. Yeah. What is up, Big Bear Hug from Ninja Bat? And guys, the conversation today that I've just only begun speaking on, it is something extraordinarily special, I think, because Jordan Hall himself, he recently came out as a Christian. And Jordan Hall has made waves on this planet. I think he recognized a long time ago and started to put a lot of energy towards the meaning crisis we find ourselves in. He's the inventor of the DivX codec that made us able to actually compress video enough to get it through our really tiny energy streams that we had back in the days of dial-up internet. He helped make video possible, and then he was actually part of mp3.com already early on before podcasts had begun, knowing that if we can decentralize the control of information, we can start putting the power back in the hands of the people, because he recognized our system of self-governance has been taken over from the inside out, as many have. So this is a lot of words to say that this is a really, really exciting episode. Jordan got Bret and Jonathan Pageau to have a more in-depth conversation than they've been able to previously. They have had one conversation in the past a few years ago. I believe it was on Bret's channel, but they were kind of talking past each other. Jordan is all about communion now. He really feels like we've got to get all the way down to the root to address the meaning crisis. And so he's very much down on changing ourselves and our local communities through the practice of communion. So what is communion? We're going to get into that. But Jordan actually created the opportunity for Bret and Jonathan to be in a place of communion. So they spent several days together before they even recorded this podcast. So they took the time out of their busy lives to all come together in one place at Jordan's house, in fact, in North Carolina. And that is where this conversation took place after a few days of quite in-depth conversation between these guys. Now we see them come to a place of communion, hopefully. Let's see what happens, guys. And Anything on your end that you want to talk? Oh, I just reminded myself. So, guys, 2 days from now, May 1st, this coming Friday, our band is releasing our newest album, Still Free. It's been in the works for at least a couple years now. We've been working on this thing for a minute. Some of these songs, like Lean In and stuff, have been around.
Oh, well, we did the IMMO EP.
We did the Inmo EP.
And then, we took a while to actually write up enough material of new material to play shows. And then it was like, well, now it's time we do an album. And I guess we started recording it. It was still warm when we started recording it.
Yeah,
right?
it was. Yeah. It
So
was
like 6 months ago.
last
Wow.
year, around October, September, maybe.
Yeah. So
I'm guessing
Yeah.
that at this point, my time is awful. My sense of time. But yeah, it's awesome. I'm really excited for this. So it's going to drop. You can actually go on to Spotify right now and pre-save it, so you can listen to it as soon as it releases midnight on Friday. You can also pre-order this on Bandcamp, Bandcamp and on iTunes as well. We need all the listeners we can get, guys. So all of you that listen to us here on Actuali, you can check out our band. I sing, DJ plays drums. We've got an amazing group of guys with us. Our great friend Jesse and Mike as well. I won't throw your all's last names out there, but find the music, check it out, guys. We greatly appreciate all the support. So look for that coming up very soon. And I guess without any further ado, let's go ahead and jump on into this thing here. So here we are, guys.
Hey, folks. Welcome to the Dark Horse Podcast Inside Rail. I am sitting today with Jordan Hall and Jonathan Pageau. Jonathan Pageau is a returning guest to Dark Horse. Many of you will remember an episode in which we had a far-ranging conversation that the audience felt you and I were talking past each other, and there was further thought that Jordan might be exactly the right person to translate between us as someone who understands both our languages well. I don't think that's going to be necessary because we've been together for several days hashing out these issues. We've learned each other's language enough that I think we can have a productive conversation. For those of you who don't know, Jonathan, I think he would not necessarily cotton to the term, but I would say he is a religious scholar. Is that an acceptable term?
It's acceptable, I guess.
All right.
Yeah.
In my book, he's a religious scholar. He specializes in Christendom, but is broadly educated. And Jordan is a little hard to pin down. Jordan is one of the broadest thinkers I know. He and I have been good friends. We've known each other since about 2008 or 9, and he is capable of bringing clarity on a wide range of issues. So without further ado, Jordan and Jonathan, let me just say welcome to Dark Horse.
Yeah, thanks for having us. Thanks. It's great.
Well,
These
this
guys
is
up just a wee
exciting.
bit.
I will say I have some trepidation. I know from our conversations over the last several days that this discussion is going to, I believe, frustrate just about everybody who watches it on one level or another, because what we're trying to do
Did it frustrate you at any point?
prototype an interaction
Or conversation?
between schools of thought.
no, not really,
that
other than
are
you're
in
an
some
atheist
ways more
talking to, religious people, and the frustration of like viewing the same phenomenon but from two different directions. And this phenomenon would be, like Bret is a materialist atheist, so he
Agnostic,
thinks
maybe.
yeah, but well, he's mentioned like he's open to the idea of the supernatural. He's just
Okay.
a scientific mind.
Yeah.
So he's looking at it from like, well, these spiritual or metaphysical experiences we have are a function of evolution
Mhm.
and the physicality of it, whereas people who come from the religious and spiritual point of view is actually, it's like, well, no, this was designed to be this way to show you the truth.
Yeah. So that's
the only thing
interesting.
that's frustrating is just it's coming from two different ends.
Seeing them have trouble reconciling those two different worldviews. And what's interesting
well,
about
and even beyond reconciling, just more like
comprehending one another, or him
well,
comprehending their perspective, or
not even that. It's like traffic moving across and crossing each other. When they're together, it can move together, right?
Mhm.
And that's one conversation. But even though they're both traffic, they're moving and they have to turn, and there's negotiations that
Mhm.
But no, Bret is also just like a kind of apologetic dude in general. He's like, I don't
Yeah.
want to be the annoying guy, but I got to be the annoying guy, and say the thing.
Yeah. And I was listening to Paul Vanderklay. He watched this whole,
Mm.
and he had some things to say about it. And he was noticing the same thing that you're noticing, that Bret seems to be doing a very Jordan Peterson kind of thing, where he's talking about how it's psychologically useful for us, and from his evolutionary biologist angle, he's like, look, I can see how this helps us. This helps us last longer over generations. I could see how this would biologically come about, this kind of believing in God story. Um, but Vanderklay pointed out something really astute, and he said that people aren't going to be, you can't be rationalized or through logic find your way to God. You are formed by God into a relationship with him. And so, maybe this conversation is more the inspiration for ourselves watching it, and maybe for Bret as well in his reflections, to open his heart up to that potential so that he can begin being formed by it from another perspective. Because right now he's kind of being a Christian apologist in a way, defending Christianity and saying, okay, I see the usefulness of this, the same way Jordan Peterson was. But it's really cool to see the comments. A lot of people praying for Bret and his family to, come to Christ, come to religion. We'll see what happens.
And Ninja Bat said, I wish religious quote unquote experts would acknowledge that humans have altered, if not outright changed, much of the holy books. Actually, a lot of them do. It's just if you're not active in watching these things and you're just seeing it from the outside, and these religious guys, they don't even talk about it. Actually, they do a lot. And a lot of Christian apologetics is actually like, well, here's the proofs that show that it's not as altered as you may think, like the Bible. Now, when you get into other things, like say like translations, you have to go a little bit deeper. And then when you get into other religions, like say like the Bhagavad Gita is translated from like a dead language, translated through other things. So maybe it's a little bit different. But then there's people who outright pervert these things.
Yep.
And actually, the religious quote unquote experts, which I don't know what you're talking about because that's very vague. They do talk about it, at least, like Jonathan Pageau, like all the time, talks about it and like clears things up. And it's like,
he's really good at it too, man. I like Pageau a lot. We've been wanting to cover him on this podcast for a minute.
And why can't Bret entertain those who believe in Anunnaki, Sumerian, and Enuma Elish? Is because those things actually have way, 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 way less credibility than say like, the Bible or, even the Bhagavad Gita and other stuff like that. And I don't mean credibility in the sense of like, oh, it's some conspiracy theory, but like there's not enough actual, say like texts and artifacts that can definitely be tied to each other over periods of time to show that this is actually what they're talking about. There's a lot of speculation. And Bret is the kind of mind where he's like, no, like you need to show how everything ties together because he's an evolutionary biologist. That's kind of how his brain works.
That's how it works,
and that's
man.
why he does't entertain, because like I like entertaining the ideas of the Anunnaki and all this stuff. It's like, cool, yeah. But I'm not, first, I don't have that kind of mind. And then also I'm not like, some super expert on any of these things. So I can just entertain it and just be like, yeah, it'd be interesting. I don't think it's plausible, but hey, whatever,
Right. Yeah. Let me see if this actually.
But Sumer existed way before Jesus and Christianity. Yeah, Ninja Bat. But the thing is how much of the Sumer text history, or the Sumerian rather, text history and everything, how well did they last? And then how many points of not coincidence, but points of coherence, things coming together, are there that we can still access? Because it may very well be true. However, time eats everything. And the reason why, say like, well, Jesus and Christianity is only 2,000 years old. Judaism is, probably like 4,000 to 6,000 years old. And then before that, the paganism that led up to Judaism is probably even older than that. But how well are records held on to, not just physical, but we're talking about, when you talk about deep history, it's also what we get is like oral histories that then were written down much later as well.
Yep.
So unless we find like hard artifacts, like actual invincible Anunnaki technology that we come across that isn't suppressed by the man. Because there's always that.
Yeah.
25,000 untranslated Sumerian tablets. Yeah, well, they're untranslated. And are they actually Sumerian? And how valid are they? Because, we've all heard about the Emerald tablets. Well, those were freaking fake, like provably freaking fake. Not saying that's the Sumerian stuff, but, people are like the Emerald tablets. But it's like, nah, that was somebody that wasn't as good as Joseph Smith at creating a religion. But anyway.
Yeah. There's a lot of stuff out there, too, that I always have a little bit of trepidation that.
Oh, and real quick, don't worry about it. It's not off topic because this is the speculation that Bret has with religion as well.
Yeah.
So, it's kind of on topic.
Right. I just shared the links up there for you, Ninja.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. No problem, brother. Gotcha.
Yeah, but no, it's not really off topic, man. It kind of is, but it's not. This is, a live conversation.
This is stuff people look forward to, or look towards, though, these kinds of ideas, because we're trying to get a grasp on reality. And so once we start going into some of the more, really challenging, outlandish, we could say, conspiracy theories, we get a sense of security from, being in the know about stuff.
Yeah.
But I think that certainty can be dangerous. Potential, it could be the case. We got to find more evidence. But I think a lot of this stuff are just distractory cul-de-sacs for us to get lost down, so we're not really looking at the real stuff like the WEF and, things like that.
Yeah.
I think a lot of it's distractions,
WEF,
Mars pyramids, Hollow
WHO.
Earth, all that kind of stuff. I think a lot of it is there to also hurt the image of anyone that does do research into genuine conspiracy theories that can be proven. All those people are crazy. Look at the stuff they look at, so we get lumped in with Anunnaki or Hollow Earth or whatever this
or
or
even
that.
look at Graham Hancock. He was just postulating the idea that we might have actually had a seafaring civilization that spread throughout the world, and it's actually kind of looking like we had it, and they're calling him a kook and all this stuff. And he never said there was, like Atlantis and stuff. He's just like, no, there actually very much seems like, we might have evidence for an almost mass extinction event about 12,500 years ago. That kind of erased stuff. And we're not as advanced as we are now, but pretty freaking advanced, then.
Possibly
enough to at least get to the Amazon and turn it into a pharmacopoeia.
Right.
But anyway,
that's an interesting thought, man. Wow, dude. God, I'd love to see some movies exploring that kind of stuff because it is fascinating. All right, Shaw. So let's go ahead and jump back in here with these gentlemen. Here we go.
Compatible than they initially seem, but that run afoul of each other in important places. And so if you're in the audience, I would just say, bear with us. The conversation that we're having is one that I think we each believe needs to be had more broadly, and this is an attempt to figure out what that might sound like and how we might do it productively. The topic really is about this moment in history when we find that there are different ways of viewing the world and our obligation to it that are in conflict, and those conflicts are looking increasingly dangerous, forcing us to try to reconcile those perspectives rather than just agree to disagree at some sort of global scale. So I obviously am an evolutionary biologist. I would say, as I've said many times before, I am perfectly open to the possibility that there is something that I would call supernatural, but I have yet to see evidence that would compel me in that direction, and rigor requires me to await such evidence. And you are orthodox and therefore coming at deep epistemological questions with great rigor, but also from a place of faith. And Jordan, I would say, tell me if I have it wrong, but you come from a school of thought that is much closer to one that would be native to me, sort of a scientific materialist worldview, but of late have become persuaded that that is not, in fact, the highest logical position to come from. You become convinced that there is something outside of what we materialists recognize as the sum total of forces that allow the universe to function. Is that fair?
Yeah, that's very fair.
All right. So I'm not sure exactly where to begin, but let me ask you, Jonathan, can you tell me how it is that somebody who is obviously deeply intellectual and compelled to be rigorous about your understanding of the universe. How does that coexist with faith for you?
I mean, I think that one of the things that I realized when I was younger at some point is that science was a very powerful tool, and it had, that's why it's all so convincing, is because it can predict phenomena, it can quantify, it can, it can do it very rigorously, and it can also predict very faithfully certain things. And so it's very convincing, but there's something, what I call verticality, that is, it doesn't provide meaning in its own method. That is, that there is a something around it. You could call it a story, you could call it a hierarchy of virtues or a hierarchy of priorities that precedes the scientific method. And so when the scientist is doing the thing, he's not concerned with that, but then it ultimately is integrated into that hierarchy, the way it's applied or the way that it's seen. And so, to me, what happens is that if you remain in this horizontal world, there's something that's missing. You don't know how to orient yourself. There's no hierarchy of values, and to me, that is the most important. That's the priority. Is that everything has to start with that hierarchy. And so, to me, it became inevitable to realize that there is that first of all, that exists, and where can we find it, and how does it work in terms of human societies? How do human societies bind together into a vertical, right? So what binds us together? What binds us together as people? And ultimately, I came to the conclusion that it is something like worship, that it's something that attention towards something that transcends you, that this happens at every level. So, as a nation, you have to be able to attend to the thing that binds you, which is your nation. As a family, you have to be able to do that. In a marriage, you have to do that. But that ultimately, I see that that's how stuff works. And so God becomes the radical of that, becomes the one that holds everything together.
The ultimate absolute source of
value. Let me
value.
just say, one of the things that we've been doing that I suspect is going to...
Like, I guess a way you could look at it is, when Pageau was talking about, if you're just existing on this plane, there's nothing to orient you.
Just the horizontal.
And so the idea is the hierarchy of value
gives you
is what orients you. And what that puts in my head is, well, what do we use to navigate in the physical world? We use the North Star if you're in the Southern Hemisphere, the Southern Cross, right? So you have to look up. You have to look up outside of the flat plane.
Yes.
Right? Because there is another dimension to existence that isn't just the flat plane of materialism.
Yeah.
And that would make sense materialistically, because we don't just live in, one dimension or two dimensions or even three dimensions, because we have the fourth dimension of time that we're moving through.
Yeah.
So if you are to then compress that into not one dimension, but, a flat two-dimensional surface, then what's the next dimension to go out of? And I'm not talking about like some mystical fifth dimension we could tap into. No, it's not like that.
But to find a depth of meaning in our lives, because you're right, it's flat when we're on that horizontal plane. There isn't much depth of meaning to anything. We become nihilistic over time.
Well, there is no depth of meaning.
Yeah.
Much less value. And value isn't just...
So how do we orient ourselves according to how we want to live our lives?
Well, how do you know how you want to live your lives if you don't have something to, say, look up to use the, the phrase...
To rise towards, to ascend towards, to grow towards.
Well, and even, when looking deeply into something as well.
Oh, right. Yeah.
So
you can go deep into the micro, you can go deep into the macro. So we need that verticality
so I think...
of association, a way of orienting to finding meaning in the world, not just finding our way around on the horizontal plane.
Yeah, and I think what we're doing within religion is, so religion, not faith or not God. So with religion, it's allowing us to conceptualize different dimensionalities that we don't necessarily interact with through pure physicality.
Right. How to orient towards those.
Yeah, because say the future, if you want to have a good life in the future, well, the future is an abstract concept that doesn't exist physically for right now, right?
Right.
But we can still do things, scientifically that can lead us towards a better future, a better future.
And we can sacrifice things right now in the moment so that we have more in the future. Yeah.
Yeah. And, what's in the future? Well, if you do it right, more God.
Yeah.
You
How
know,
do you
if you're
rate those
going
things?
towards that,
Yeah.
you know,
How do you rate what you want to grow towards? So
Yeah.
we need that absolute ideal.
So yeah, I think
Yeah.
that's what Pageau is talking about,
Yeah.
like, or at least the framework he's setting up.
That's exactly. I think that's where they're going. Yep. All right, let's go.
Frustrate people is when I hear you or really anyone of faith speaking, I am tracking whether or not my materialist worldview can be mapped onto what you're saying. And there's a very large space in which it's not even difficult to do. And then there's a point at which it becomes impossible. And, or at least for me, it is so far impossible. And that ends up being the sticking point. From the point of view of your claim that there is something missing, I would agree. Science is not a sufficient worldview because it does lack inherent values. Now, there are obviously people who would disagree with that. Sam Harris, for example, would claim that you can work bottom up from the facts of the universe to a description of how it is that we are to live. I think it's absurd. I think, frankly, one of the things that Sam says is that we can all agree that suffering is bad and therefore we should work to minimize it, and that's deducible from the facts. I don't think it is, because for one thing, and you might map this onto the AI discussion, if you decide that it's all of our obligation to minimize suffering, there is an obvious way to do it, and it is absolutely the opposite of what we should do. You could end things that suffer and then stop suffering. So, if you become possessed of the idea that everything is reducible to the science, you end up in absurd paradoxes, and there's no reason for it.
Tyranny.
Our sponsor.
So I'm glad that he has the self-honesty to be able to admit that science cannot give you that value orientation. So let's go ahead and skip past this.
Yeah, and real quick, Ninja Bet sent something. So no matter how good or strong the science, faith, or belief is, we won't find it until something huge happens. No. Actually, sometimes it's the smallest thing is just looking up.
Yeah.
Right? Like there's this weird delusion we have as a species that, the signs will be great and huge and whatever, like signs to change your life or other stuff will be great and huge and whatever, but sometimes it's just looking up.
Yep.
Or knowing that you have a kid coming so you get your life together. Well, the kid isn't there yet. That huge thing hasn't happened. It's just a small seed of an idea.
Oh, yeah.
That has come,
Sam Harris went rogue. Now Christopher Hitchens was really great.
Yeah,
he was a good debater.
He was a good debater, but I think he kind of got stuck in his spiral or his circle, like his circle of reason, opposed to poking outside of it.
Looking up, I agree, until Pidgey poops in your eye.
Well, she hasn't pooped in my eye yet. She's pretty good about, like, most of the time not pooping on me. Pidgey is a very wonderful pigeon that I think has a crush on me.
So, in truth, humans are still limited in its physical form. The spirit is being inhibited by this form and the evil that exists from other realms that have influence in ours.
Well, that's why we have wonderful things like the Bible and the prophets that came before Jesus to set up for that point in time, and then our ability to actually, maybe not some physical, mystical woo-woo transcending out of this fleshly form, but being able to move outside of. Okay, so there will be suffering in this world, and there will be suffering from us. But you can suffer and you can still be happy. You can still use reason. You can be in the most horrific prison and you can still have a contact with God.
Yeah. You can find beauty even in the suffering, and that is certainly, I believe, truth, beauty, synonymous with God.
Yeah. But add more dimensions to our ability to think. Multidimensional thinking.
Amen. Yeah, wherever our morality came from, we know what the meaning of life is. We're just being blinded spiritually by evil ones. I could agree with that 100%. Yeah.
Yep.
There are people that actually have that position, that in fact humanity, that living things should ultimately cease to exist, or that we should minimize their existence so that we actually remove suffering from the universe. And so that's what people actually believe. There are some people that believe that.
There are some people who believe that, and we need to make sure that they gain power because they're liable to do something terrifying. All right, Jordan, do you want to explain how it is that somebody who is as deeply insightful and capable in the realm of science and logic finds yourself in a place where faith is now playing a dominant role in your life?
Briefly, I assume. This is not an easy
Yeah, all
answer.
right. Let's try it briefly first. Yeah.
Maybe a way of thinking about it is one of the phrases that came up in our conversation was that it's an error to imagine that science and, I'll just say religion, are competing for the same domain. It is proper, and the old-fashioned phrase was that theology is the queen of the sciences.
I like
and
where
the
he
key
goes
thing
here.
here is to recognize that in relationship to, say, a knight, a queen is not like a bigger, stronger knight. The queen is one who stands next to, in fact, in some sense, particularly above the knight, but provides the knight with the context that orients the knight towards why the knight is doing what the knight is doing and how to do it properly.
Yeah.
Right? Once you recognize that, then you recognize that both of these domains are not just compatible, but if they are separated, catastrophic. And that when they cross the streams, I mean, theology tries to do science. This creates all kinds of weird errors that are sometimes profoundly bad for theology because they're so absurd and so easy to undermine that then you
Quite
lose track.
silly.
This is what religion tried to do during the scientific revolution. They tried to be like, oh no, the Earth really is 6,000 years old. It's like, you need to compete on the level of facts of what the world is made of, just on how to live in this world.
Yeah, like the whole Christian Science movement, and Christian Scientism, and you know, like, yeah, well, you know, it is only 6,000 years old, but the fossils were put here to test our faith, right?
Yeah, dudes. I mean, you don't have to reach like that. No, you have incredibly deep, powerful allegories that are realer than real, truer than true, in some very strange, fundamental kind of way.
Or it could be, you know, also like just taking scripture too literally, you know, because there's a portion of it that needs to be taken literally because it's a history, right? But then there's a whole bunch more that isn't literal. Right?
Yes, and it's just there as a teaching vehicle. It's to teach you an idea,
but if
a moral lesson or
if
something.
you cross the streams and you know take the literal side and try to be like, well, that's what the spiritual meaning is, and that's what gets you into heaven, catastrophic. When you take the spiritual end and you try to make science out of it, and then you get the wacky crystal hermetic philosopher guru garbage.
Yeah,
and I'm not saying anybody that has had a guru or reads into the hermetic, texts and stuff like that. Like, I'm not saying like you're woo-woo garbage, but you know what I mean? Like mainstream, like modern hippie, like, oh yeah, no, just rub a crystal on it, bruh.
yeah.
Let me put this stuff together and put it by your TV to keep the Wi-Fi away from you, dude.
Oh yeah. Get the sheets that are gonna block the.
Well, actually, the RF, the radio frequency blocking sheets actually do work because they're Faraday cages for your body. Just don't expect to use your phone while you're wearing one all curled up inside of it.
Yeah, right.
And what's her name? MIA, the rapper. Yeah, she has a whole product line of that stuff.
I've heard about that. Now, does that stuff actually help or do anything?
Well, the question is, well, we need to get into science opposed to woo-woo and figure out how much EM radiation actually affects humans and what it does.
Right.
So then we can actually get a ruler up against it and test it.
Yeah, that would be interesting to see.
Yeah, you can't test faith with a ruler. You can test certain things like the application of faith with a ruler.
It's so hard to find good science nowadays. I mean, the whole peer-reviewed system is corrupted. I mean, there's
the whole statistics system.
So much ideological positioning going on in science now.
And yeah. And if you don't actually know how to read papers and look into like what techniques they're using, and then look at the history of that technique and whether it's credible or not anymore, or look at what their sampling base is or what they're defining their samples as, or like. Because everything's right wing and right wing terrorism.
Oh, that's
nowadays,
right.
Right.
Oh, yeah. Remember, like, if you questioned in the very beginning when COVID first come out, if you're like, was it a lab leak? If you even uttered those words, you automatically. And they had front page headlines on the Washington Post, New York Times, and all the major media channels.
You get fired from
saying
your job,
that you're a right wing white supremacist. Like, what? What do these things have to do with one another?
But to get back to Mr. Hall's position here is you'd have the knight, which is the doer, and then you'd have the queen, which is the orientating. So this goes to kind of what Pageau was talking about, where the knight acts upon the plane, flat plane, and the queen orients the direction and the action of the knight.
The action.
If the queen is
She helps him
orienting
orient,
on the
yes.
plane, and your orientation mechanism is on this flat plane, disaster. If the knight tries to stand
Oh,
above what
right.
it can do and is I am the orienter,
Yeah.
disaster.
Disaster.
So that's
Yeah.
what Jordan Hall's talking about.
Okay.
You know,
Yeah. That's
long way to
really
say
well
what he
put.
said shortly, but you
Well,
know.
I think what he's doing here is brilliant too, because he's taken it out of the realm of debate now. He's totally said, no, we're actually talking about this the wrong way. These are two different domains. They don't need to argue against each other. You just need to figure out how they work together again.
They
in a
need
way
to
that
work
we can agree
together
on.
and not separate it, and also not trying to do what the other does.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. Alrighty, so give him a little bit of rewind there. Here we go.
This creates all kinds of weird errors that are sometimes profoundly bad for theology because they're so absurd and so easy to undermine
flat
that then
earth,
you
stuff
lose
like
track
that.
of this altogether. The same thing happens, of course, when science tries to do theology. So the challenge is to figure out how to actually allow each to hold its proper role and then bring them into their proper relationship so that we can, in fact, actually live. I think we should just kind of hit that point. In some profound sense, the beginning and the end of science is about understanding how to say true things about reality. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to perceive reality clearly, trying to perceive reality with each other clearly. It's an important piece. And then be able to actually articulate that honestly but truthfully.
That's great. Let me hear that again.
Trying to understanding how to say true things about reality.
Science.
That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to perceive reality clearly, trying to perceive reality with each other clearly. It's an important piece. And then be able to actually articulate that honestly but truthfully, saying true things about reality. Whereas in a profound sense, religion is about how to live in reality well, like to live wholesome, vital, thriving, fruitful lives, right? Now you can see how obviously these fit together. If you cannot understand reality well, or you lie about it constantly, note to our culture, then your life is going to begin to degrade. Equally, your ability to do these kinds of things begins to degrade when, for example, the underlying ethos of honesty is not
value
present.
of truth. The value of truth cannot come from science itself. It has to come from something that precedes it and then is injected into the attitude that you bring to what it is you're doing. And we've seen, it seems to me, we've actually seen that
You need to be able to properly orient yourself by value in order to do science properly. You need to have the right value set in mind before you even try and do science, because you could use science for evil.
Well, and
or do it wrong.
Also, first you have to have an idea of something and build a hypothesis, and then test the hypothesis. And then once you've tested it ad nauseum and nobody can, you can't disprove it, then you have a theory.
So you have a value
and
of
then
truth.
You also
because you're trying to disprove yourself during that process.
You have a hierarchy of values. The first value is, say, the question. I have this idea, this question.
What is this thing about reality?
And then you structure that question into a hypothesis.
Yes.
That then in a hypothesis has testable points.
Yep. And how do I know this is true?
And then once you get to that, you get to a theory and you share it with other people and you allow them to then
test it as well.
Develop an idea and build that hierarchy again. And
so
by
you have
hierarchy,
to
I mean,
do everything in good faith from the start for this to work properly.
Well, to work optimally, yes.
Optimally,
yeah. Exactly. Actually, there used to be a lot of moral rules on how to do science properly.
Yeah.
Even though when they were doing immoral things, but still how to like test properly, and lots of debates and discussions about like, which techniques or ideal lines are viable and which are not, because over time, because it's not just the theory that's tested, but how we theorize that is tested with all of us.
Yep.
So that's the science. And then, well, okay, how do you live well? Okay, let's observe the things that make life well. Okay, let's do it together. This science and religion together. Anyway,
it makes a cross.
Yeah, right.
All right.
Understanding the world and living in it well.
Yes.
They go together, right?
Yes.
Come from science itself. It has to come from something that precedes it and then is injected into the attitude that you bring to what it is you're doing. And we've seen, it seems to me, we've actually seen even the scientific method break down in the scientific world because people have lost the honesty, right? A lot of the insane things that have come around gender and all of this nonsense has been due to the fact that the people that are engaged in science don't have the value necessary to do science properly, and therefore have actually distorted science.
Right. And we can say, like, there's an ordinary stack that is well known to old-fashioned honest people, which is a thing called character. And then you've got things like values. Character would be to have lived in such a way that the values that are yours, at the very least, and ideally values that are good, have become the way that you show up in life regularly, under whatever context you find yourself in, particularly when you're under duress. We've seen circumstances in the past where people who otherwise were showing up with, say, earnest integrity for sometimes quite bewildering reasons began to be full of shit. And that's a lack of character. And so if you've got character, you have something that people can count on and they can relate to. And then above that is something like good faith. And notice the word faith is in there, right? An actual capacity
A good faith
to
argument.
choose to be in relationship with reality and with other people on the basis of what is good and true, without a particular need or desire on your part to be, say, right, or to have your version of things be dominant, but rather ultimately with a willingness to sacrifice yourself in service of something that is higher than your particular ego or model or mind. And the basic point is something like, for sure, if we cannot show up with good character and good faith, then the entire institutional fabric of science is utterly corrupted and can do nothing but become a form of ideology, which then becomes a form of a bludgeon.
Yeah.
And the flip side is also true. I mean, if you can actually cultivate people who can, who have good character and who can hold to the responsibility of truth with integrity, then magic happens.
Yeah.
Then we actually find things, rich, powerful, deep, insightful things, and we all learn from that. And you hinted at this, but I think it's critical to say that while what I'm saying is sort of obviously true, it is simultaneously, obviously, decreasingly present in the world in which we live, and obviously increasingly necessary, lest the world, in fact, actually fly apart.
100%.
So I just want to say one last thing regarding to said, is that we saw an example of this. It was a very particular example in COVID. If you remember the follow the science idea, and there was very pernicious. Because
Brett actually does not remember that.
No, you don't remember. Of course,
I was traumatized by it, so I remember it rather vividly.
And so
good work.
the way that what was happening is that what actually needed to happen was a discussion about priorities and values, which is that we have things that we find important and we have to balance the different things we do based on the different priorities we have. That discussion was never taken. They took this medical layer of reality and they limited everything to that layer, and they tried to say, well, this is what the science says. If you don't want to get sick, these are all the things you need to do, and we're going to limit it to that world, and we're going to follow the science. And it was ridiculous because, and it was the most superficial type of follow the science that you could find, because if we actually had a true discussion between the hierarchy of values and then what science can help us do in that hierarchy of values, then we could have formulated a much better response that would have respected our need to be together, for families to be together, for children to have friends, all of that, all of these things that we totally ignored and just focused on this like chemical, medical layer.
And by the way, we could have actually got...
we wouldn't have had people not be able to see their loved ones in their time of passing.
Yeah.
And we wouldn't have had our kids pushed back 2-3 years of their education.
And it's interesting that Pageau said, use the metaphor of compressing it. Remember what it felt like during COVID? Like it was heavy and you're pressed down and you're pressed in, and like you couldn't go out. Why we're seeing, well, one of the reasons why I think we're seeing so many people like hugging and going out and being wholesome and stuff is we were so heavily deprived of it for
that's really
4 years.
Dude. So true. That chimes.
And I like the language that they use, particularly Jordan Hall and Pageau, because it's metaphoric, symbolic language that allows you to, see it, not just trying to understand the words.
It helps you to ponder it because it gives you something that you can look at. It's a symbol, so there's layers of meaning.
You can even feel it.
Yes,
like the word compress. Like you can
feel yourself start to try and embody it. Yeah, you can.
And when they say like a plane, well, you can see the plane. It's this flat thing. Some people might see like this checkerboard pattern.
Yeah,
a queen and a knight. Well, you could think of like royalty, or you could think of the game of chess, and and this is language is a scientific process as well. So we've developed language to help us understand the world and communicate it to other people as well. And that's why I would have to agree with Pageau that our value systems, religion came first, even before the science of the language, even before the language.
Yeah.
A common belief, common practices together, and then we start figuring out how to communicate these to each other and live as best a life as we can within value sets and developing our value sets as well. Because
You know, we've seen monkeys do weird things like pile stones up at the foot of a tree, and they don't know why they're doing it. But I think I see what you're saying there.
Yeah.
Like we were forming religious kinds of practices before we even begin to speak and develop our language as a species. It's not unlikely because we were probably singing and making sounds and music before we got to the language part.
I think we'd understand it if we can figure out the value to the monkey that pile of stones has.
Yeah, we could.
Right? Because it's not
Yeah.
about the pile of stones. It's about the value of doing that.
It's something
Right.
about like this tree is important to them for some reason.
And
We
maybe
could start
it's a
going
marker
into,
that, you know, every so often there's good fruit on this tree. It's this one.
Yeah.
Maybe it's something like that.
And then it grows into something that we love this kind of tree because
Yeah.
it keeps us
Well,
alive. And then it starts to become something more almost
value-
worshipful.
Yeah, and the value extends and expands. And, you know, though I may be a Christian, I do understand that man's religion has evolved with man's understanding of God and reality.
hmm
Right.
For sure.
I just think Christianity is the pinnacle as where we're at right now until the quote unquote new heaven and earth is revealed to us.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I love how Martin Shaw, I think it was that we covered, talked about how he sees Christianity as like the ultimate evolution of paganism. He's like, it incorporates everything that came before it. It takes in these Eastern mystery schools, notions of non-duality. It incorporates the planet, the world, the life-loving side of paganism. It just brings it all into like a culmination, and then it personalizes it. It gives us an actual human being that we can relate to, that lived perfectly, that lived as God in human form, in flesh, so that we can actually relate with it, because we're human. Like we can't relate with this infinite source of all creation so easily, so readily, but we can relate to it through the embodied form that ineffable source took in the form of Jesus Christ.
Yeah,
For instance.
we can relate to it through focuses and filters.
Yes.
Right? You can't look directly at the sun, but
Yeah,
we can focus and
too
we
much
can filter
information.
it, and we can see in ever more increasing detail
Yeah.
the surface of the
But
sun.
you can
right?
come to know God a little bit
Yeah.
more and
Yeah.
more and more and more as you start to try and live like Jesus Christ, because that is God giving us the way, the optimal way of being in human form. So we have something to measure ourselves by.
Who was it that said this? I forget who it was, but it's a really good quote and idea. Is essentially my belief in God is like the belief in the sun. It's not because I can see it, but by it I see everything. Right.
Mm.
So when you're living in faith in life, you know, faith to, you know, your God, your value sets, that's how you see the world. You interact with it,
That's
right?
true.
Because you're not looking at the sun.
That's how you
you're
frame.
looking at what the sun shines upon, right?
And how it shines in particular ways. You're more focused on the light rather than the darkness. You could say.
I
to
wish I could
simplify the
remember
metaphor.
who said that. I'd give the accreditation, but I don't remember. You know, that's what happens when you listen to like long form lectures and podcasts and other stuff on double speed like all the time. You just kind of forget who said what, and it all just kind of blurs together into one like meta philosopher.
Yeah, I know, right? I have to write them down, man, and I do it all the time. Like this one from Tolstoy: everyone thinks of changing the world, no one thinks of changing himself.
Yeah, right.
That's the whole point of this podcast here, guys. That's what we're trying to do here.
Well,
and
that's the actual I, right?
That's the actual I. Is the source of all. Is that underlying, you could say, capital S self that they talk about a lot in like Buddhism and Advaita Vedanta, but you could also call it the inner Christ, the inner Buddha. The self before the ego, the experience of awareness or of a reality prior to our mind's interpretations of everything,
Yeah,
you know,
but-
because our mind's always labeling and talking to itself.
Well,
but
it's-
just the sheer awareness, we all share the same sheer awareness.
Yeah.
And it has personality less. It has no personality. Our personality is like a filter that goes on top of that. Awareness is here. That's the actual I think. It's like a point of refuge for all of us. It's our home. It's our truest, deepest, innate self. And if you're ever having any troubles, you can actually watch your mind going through the process of the suffering, take a step back into the awareness of that, and all of a sudden you can experience some more peace and a little bit more room to actually look at what is going on in your mind and understand it from an outward perspective. We're not as immediately impacted by the emotions. And then you can start to control your thoughts rather than your thoughts governing you and your reality. You now use your thoughts as the tool that they actually are.
Yeah, and you know, you could also say that the actual I, that self behind the self, is one of the only things that we share.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? We just kind of forgot that we all have it.
It's
Right.
that innate sense of oneness that we sometimes, quite fortunately, out of like sheer grace, get to experience.
Well, and you could also equate it to like personness,
Hmm.
right? And let's
Like the ness part of it.
well, to be a person without all the crap we lump onto this person. And when it's all together we call it people, but it's persons
Mm-hmm.
or just person. Right. Because like I want to bring up person because like when we talk about like the self and like getting rid of the ego, it's like it's not literally we're all just like underneath one gelatinous spiritual being. That's there are still persons.
There are the
Right, opposed
personified
to
aspects.
not mask persons, not like like
Well,
a
there's
personage
there's
person.
a true person that we're trying to figure out how to be.
Yeah,
The authentic expression of this biology, that
well,
pure awareness
and
shining through this unique biology.
Yeah, and there's a reason why we use the word self to refer to this person,
Yeah.
or that person, but
Yep.
self and person behind all the stuff that's stuck to it is that one thing we all share. That's why, like, when you're living properly with life, you can see the person in somebody else that's also in yourself.
You can see,
So
you can see the self in them that's also in you, in fact. Because person, I try and be careful around because the word person comes from Latin for personage, which is a cast image.
Sure.
So we think we are our personalities, but what we really are is the thing that has the personality. I have this kind of personality. I like this kind of music.
Yeah, and
who is the I?
I'm using the more what Jesus does for people definition of person, as in
The healthy
the
person.
agapic love making an individual a person.
I think we can make a distinction between the personage and the true person. Yeah.
More like, the mover opposed to the thing being moved. Don't identify with the thing being moved. Be identified with the mover. That's the person. So my belief in the triune nature of God.
What we really are is the being part. We're not even the doing part.
Yeah, so my idea of the triune nature of God, and this is where I disagree with Catholics and probably Orthodox as well, is there's one nature of God. That's God. Ever pervasive.
Absolute.
Yeah. Then there's three instances of that. There's God the Father that we call the Father because of the attributes of, when we use the term Father, what that means, putting out the potential into the universe. There's the Holy Spirit through which the potential goes through. And then there's the Son that the potential is fulfilled within. And then there is one person, that is the Son. God the Father, I don't see as a person, nor the Holy Spirit.
The true person
Jesus was the person.
is the inner Christ or the inner Buddha.
Well, and that's where relationship was. In John, the Gospel John, when he retells Genesis, there was God and there was the Word, and the Word was with him, and the Word was him. The first instance of reality is relationship between a person and himself.
Reality was infused with that personhood of Christ.
Yes, and when you distill it down, it does become cast images in the physical world.
Yes.
But ultimately, what it's looking at when you get off the base plane, what it's looking at is what are those cast images, cast from, and also trying to imitate.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So
yes.
may wear masks, but masks tell the stories.
Yeah. And so as long as you're not I remember I used to listen to this guy John Sherman, and he would talk about how all of the problems in the world all stem from the fact that we misidentify. We all think that we are our ideas of selves, that cast image personage, rather than the one that has that cast image. And what is the one that has that cast image? Who is the I that has the personality? Because I can say I have a personality, so I know I'm not the personality, but who's the I that acts through that personality? You can't even describe it, because a personality is a list of attributes and distinctions and details.
It's an ality. like reality.
Yeah.
It's a bunch of things that
Yeah.
you can look at and go, oh, and you can point to. That's
you can say, and you can think that that's you, but that's not you. Those are things that you have. Who's the you that has them? So that's self-inquiry. That's the practice of going deep within oneself to try and find that source of what we really are. And the more you do that through prayer or meditation, the closer I do believe that you get to that underlying substrate, to that source.
And Paulo Tejas, yes, that is different from Romans and Catholics. Yeah, it is. This is just, when I'm talking about the triune nature of God, the way I described it, one instance or three instances, one nature, one person, opposed to three persons. That is very different. But I have a logical and then something eating at me reason for it. And hey, thanks for showing up in the chat, buddy. But yeah, it is different. And, I have accepted that I am a bit of a heretic, and that's fine. I'm willing to risk going to hell to get this right and get a better relationship with God.
I think your intentionality is fine.
Well,
I think the intentionality is
the
the
Protestants,
point.
like a lot of the Protestants will tell me I'm going to hell because I don't believe what they believe. The Catholics will tell me I'm going to hell. The Orthodox will just go, it's not my place to tell you if you're going to hell or not.
If you want to know what's true to be a better servant in this reality, I think that orientation is on point.
I also don't believe in hell as like the infinite fire. No, hell is just not existing, as in like not existing with God. Being separated from God, and therefore you don't exist.
I think God is, infinitely multidimensional, and I think that he does have quite a unique way of expressing himself in ways that we can all understand and find a way to as well. So maybe
we just have to be careful.
Multiple things can be true at once. I don't know. Yeah, that's a tricky one there. So let's go ahead. Let's jump back in here and let these guys pick back up.
Into something like truth about the chemical metal.
Right, yeah, exactly.
Well, but
I'm gonna give a little bit of rewind there so we can get back into
respect and our need to be together, for families to be together, for, children to have friends, all of these things that we totally ignored and just focused on this like chemical, medical layer.
And by the way, we could have actually gotten to something like
COVID,
truth about the chemical metal.
Right, yeah, exactly.
Well, but that's what I wanted to say.
Yeah,
It was ridiculous twice over.
Yes.
Because on the one hand, it was the discussion of the so-called science without the discussion of the values, but the science wasn't science at all. It was the product of a cult that we had no ability to check in on and figure out how they'd come to anything. So, for example, the fact that we were locked down, that the beaches were closed, that the trails were closed, that the sand was poured into the skate parks was ludicrous in light of the fact that the science actually did say that the virus didn't transmit outdoors. So, and that is one of a dozen examples I could give you where what we did wasn't reasonable with respect to the values or with respect to the actual.
The people that had the worst, that succumbed to COVID, the worst, were the ones that were low on vitamin D as well. They were telling us the exact opposite of what we needed to be doing. Go outside more. You're going to be safer than being cooped up indoors with people.
And now, so that's provable because in Europe, the black people in Europe were having the greatest problem.
Wow. Yeah.
Because there's like not nearly enough sun, and they have a whole lot more pigmentation that keeps the sun from getting in. And also, black people tend to be black people in higher portions of the northern hemisphere tend to have issues with vitamin D deficiency.
Yeah, if you have more pigment in your skin and you're in this hemisphere, fam, you guys need to be supplementing vitamin D.
You guys got to go like bathe in the sun more.
And find a good vitamin D supplement.
Yeah, for sure. Even you gingers too, you still need your sun. Just because you burn in it doesn't mean you don't need some of it. So go get some sun. We all need it.
All right. So jumping back.
We'll attempt to deal with the virus as a physical phenomenon.
Yeah, this has been true in terms of scientism, like this weird aspect of scientific thinking that tries to take over everything is that often what happens is that people say, look just at the science, but there's actually a secret value that is behind it, right? And so when you say something like, oh, look at the science, we can create pills that will prevent women from getting pregnant. And look at the science. Here's what the science does. We're going to do this. We're going to get into the world. But there's actually a value that is making you do that behind it, and you can just pretend that it's not there and just say, well, no, this is a medical thing. It's a purely medical scientific thing, and you can in some ways obfuscate what the value that are motivating the action really are. Well, same with AI. We see the same problem with AI. It's like we're not asking what is the reason why we're doing this. We're just like, no, we can do this. Here's the science. Here's the math. We can do it, and we just push. But there's something else behind it.
Well, there's a lost leader, obviously. Yeah. Anybody who has compared an AI search to a Google search understands that there's tremendous power to do wonderful things with this. You can answer questions that you can't answer with Google, or at least not without spending a week sorting through a bunch of haphazard results. On the other hand, AI is a profound intervention in a complex system which is guaranteed to produce unintended consequences about which we have not had a proper discussion. We've had ghost stories about what might happen, but nobody is managing the fact that we are guaranteeing chaos of a kind we are not prepared to address, and we don't even have a shared framework about those values that should govern our reaction to the consequences of this. We're just
we don't have a shared values that should govern
our reaction to the consequences of this. We're just sort of running an uncontrolled experiment, and that's not it's not a rational thing to do. It's just sort of the march of technology and what is our de facto shared religion, which is that anything that makes us more powerful is inherently good.
Yeah, that's right.
Demonstrably false.
Well, because
Right.
I'm doing
just
good.
you said de facto,
Yeah.
and this is important. You're going to have a religion. If the word shared is anywhere in there, there's a religion involved. And it's going to be de facto if it is not de jure. But if you've not actually endeavored to enter into it with sort of rigor and depth and earnestness and investigation, practice and tradition, then it's going to be something that is imported, rough, and usually quite toxic. Because we'll have to be dealing with how does it win in the local regime of whatever kind of mimetic warfare domain it finds itself in. And that's a terrible way to select your religion.
Well, I want to. This is one of these places that, in order to have a proper discussion between people who have educated themselves separately, in order to do high quality work, anybody who does that ends up having to redefine terms and make up other terms in order to do the work well. Because the natural consequence of, millions of people speaking a language is that the terms become very dull and broad, and that you can't do rigorous work with them. So. I always point out to people who are trying to do rigorous work, you've redefined things and you forgot that you did it. And then when you talk to people, you do tend to talk past them. So anyway, I would say it's not inevitable that you will have a religion. Mm-hmm. It is inevitable that something will play that role in your life. Yeah. But in my terminology, you cannot start a religion. You start a cult. And if it is high quality, selection shapes it into a religion over time. But there's lots of garbage cult. And what is going on in the space of science right now is a garbage cult, right? It is not viable in any regard. And what happened is people embraced it because it's clearly very powerful. But power is not the only ingredient that you need in order to have a proper tradition that fits in that space of religion. In fact, the only things that we can be sure have that capability are ancient religions. And how do we know they have that capability? Because they have stood the test of time. So the bitter pill that comes with that is having stood the test of time against past challenges is not a guarantee that they have the goods to address current challenges that nobody has seen before. And I'm afraid, as much as I feel like it's my job as an evolutionist to point out, actually, the religious folks are trying to tell you something of profound importance, I also feel like I have to say to the religious folks, there's timeless wisdom in what you're saying, and then there is a zone in which there isn't any timeless wisdom, and it is necessary that we find it because the problems that we are facing are now simply novel, and the degree to which the solutions that we have are there, they're just incomplete.
But I think that the base...
So before we go on, I think we should cut it there because that's a really good spot to pick up next week, and we'll probably pick up on a little bit of that, what he was talking about, to go into this next portion of it, because this is an hour-long thing, and I think we really need to actually go through the whole thing. It was a really good, really good discussion. But that's kind of, laying out Bret's idea, and I agree as far as like, well, you don't start a religion, you start a cult, and if it proves that it actually works, then it becomes a religion, and only religions that we can actually tell that actually worked were the ancient ones because they stood the test of time. However, just because it was able to withstand older problems, and particularly with how quick we've grown just within the past 100 years as a species, there's no guarantee that it's going to have the problem-solving capability for now. But there is a zone in which we need to get into to find out what actually works within these ancient religions now.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
And Christianity actually kind of showed that,
I think it
when
does.
Jesus came to say, is like, I'm not coming to, destroy the scripture. I'm coming to fulfill it. I'm the new wine in the new wineskins, and it's about new and fulfilling what it was.
I'm an evolution of our understanding and way of relating with.
That the whole religion up to then was growing and setting itself up for that period of time.
Yep.
Which, now we're at the crux where we have to make the decision, like, where are we going as a species?
Yeah.
What are we doing? What are we going to allow to happen? What are we going to allow to be acceptable?
Right. And I get Bret's fear. I mean, his fear is that this time that we're in now, we have never been through anything like this before. Can religion help us with this now? I think it actually can, because religion isn't telling us what to do. It's telling us how to orient in every situation. And that is the first block that we need to be able to build a way forward, I think, is first you just got to get the orientation right. And
definitely reorientate to something familiar first.
Yes.
And then
adjust especially a way that teaches us from a place of love and unconditionality for one another. I mean, I think that is going to help us be able to hear one another and have the peace within ourselves to be able to even get through the hard conversations we're going to need to have. Because that really is the time that we're in. There's a lot of hard conversations we need to have as a species. We all know each other now. All of these disparate cultures around the planet within the last 100 years, thanks to, train, telephone, TV, internet, so forth. We all have progressively faster and faster and faster gotten to know one another, and our cultures have been clashing for the last 100 years at an ever increasing rate. But they're also mingling and getting to know one another. You see it in America: jazz, soul, rock and roll, stand-up comedy,
anime,
movies, and anime.
And then apparently the Japanese really love westerns and Western,
and we love anime. It's just beautiful. I love it.
Yeah,
it's so cool, man.
Hey,
so we're getting to know one another, and we're celebrating things that we like about one another. We just got to continue through this process without killing ourselves off, and that is going to mean that each and every single one of us have got to be doing the soul searching within to find that place of peace within ourselves, because we're all going to have some hard conversations with our own families and our own communities. If every single one of us are not involved in this, we're not going to get anywhere. As many of us as possible needs to get on board with this.
Yeah.
This is a whole different way of change. It's a completely different approach to the game. This is game B instead of game A. We're saying, okay, well, we need a new way. And you know what? Actually, there was a way presented to us a couple thousand years ago that is timeless. It works at all times.
And ultimately, that was probably the real game B or game C.
It's still been catching up. If we're still learning about it, we're still trying to learn how to incorporate it into our lives.
Yeah.
We're finally getting at a place where we can now, at a global level, in conversation with one another, thanks to this thing called the internet, be able to actually have those conversations. We've never been able to have them en masse on a global level before. We've been able to do it within our tribes and find ways to live together symbiotically.
Yeah. And so we come to the Good News Roundup,
yes,
and
sir.
Ninja Bat has great news for the Good News Roundup. Tobacco naturally grown and used. Research is coming out, says it helps cure or remediate illness and allergies. Yeah, and actually nicotine in and of itself, and that nicotine isn't as addictive as we thought. It's actually pretty good for your brain. It's in just about everything, and it can really help with inflammation issues.
A lot of people use it as a nootropic. It can help stave off, I believe, Alzheimer's. It was also one of those things they noticed was made it harder for COVID to be able to catch on to you.
Why did my smoker friends not get COVID or not get it nearly as bad?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and I've scaled down to the nicotine pouches that don't have anything but nicotine, which is nice because I'm not inhaling all that stuff anymore. I think that was the main problem I was having, because I was always getting sinus infections, and throat issues from all the smoking.
Smoking habitually tobacco is different than using it as a medicinal use, and like using smoke to help with and remedy things has been used forever, and actually like it does kind of work. Particularly tobacco. Tobacco's been used all around the world for its medicinal capabilities, as well as like old school stuff actually used to get you pretty high. A nicotine high is not a clean, nice high, but whatever.
Yeah, I never liked that nicotine buzz very much. Yeah. It would just let me know I'd gotten the nicotine, but it makes you feel dizzy and weird.
All right.
Well, fam, let's go ahead. Let's do that good news roundup. There's so much bad news in this world. It's really nice to find some of the good stuff that's going on out there. Grandma said, find the heroes. In those times of crisis, look for the heroes. You always find them. So researchers have developed a way to get natural gas that is renewable directly from sewage.
I've been talking about this for years.
For years. I knew he was going to like this one. A pilot study employing a new method for treating sewage sludge efficiently created renewable natural gas while slashing in half the cost of the treatment. Washington State University team described the process this week in Chemical Engineering Journal, touting it as a way to help communities sustainably clean up their waste while providing renewable natural gas for their energy needs. When the researchers pre-treated sludge collected from a nearby wastewater facility, they produced 200% more renewable natural gas. There we go. That's a little better.
Oh, so they figured out how
compared
to
to current
amplify
practices.
it. Yeah.
Yeah. And so they cut the cost. This technology basically converts up to 80% of the sewage sludge into something valuable. That's good numbers. Renewable gas can be used the same way as fossil fuel-based natural gas, so that's great. Addressing the giant energy drain from current methods.
Yeah, maybe you can. They can run their own facilities off the natural gas.
Look at this. Yeah, you're right. Wastewater treatment facilities use large amounts of electricity to clean up municipal wastewater. About 3 to 4% of the total electricity demand in the U.S. They're often the largest user of electricity in small communities. Treatment process also contributes to global warming, maybe adding about 21 million metric tons of greenhouse gases to the atmosphere, and blah, 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 blah. Anyways, we can actually make energy out of our sludge. That's freaking awesome.
Everything that rots and breaks down produces CH4, which is methane, which is the cleanest thing you can burn because it's 1 carbon, 4 hydrogens. And when you burn it, you get water. So that's 1 oxygen, 2 hydrogens. So that's 2 hydrogens gone. And then you get carbon dioxide. Takes the carbon and it bonds to the other. So 1 molecule of water, 1 molecule of carbon dioxide. And carbon dioxide isn't the devil. The plants love it.
Here it is. So this is how they did it. They added a pre-treatment step, treating the sludge at high temperature and pressure with oxygen added before the anaerobic digestion process. The small amount of oxygen under high pressure conditions acts as a catalyst to break down the long polymer chains in the material. And then they use a novel bacterial strain that they discovered and isolated to upgrade the biogas. They've patented this now, converting carbon dioxide with hydrogen into methane or renewable natural gas. Brilliant.
Oh,
and this bug doesn't need anything. It's a workhorse. It just goes at it.
I misspoke. When you burn methane, it creates 2 portions of water and 1 portion of carbon dioxide. The carbon bonds with 2 oxygen molecules. 2 oxygen molecules bond with each with 2 hydrogen molecules. So you get twice the water for carbon dioxide.
Yeah.
So just saying.
Hell yeah. All right.
Natural gas for the win.
Really, man, this is actually awesome. So we can start making natural gas that is renewable.
Yeah,
like endlessly. Basically, we're always going to be making waste.
Well, one of the largest producers of methane on the planet are like forests and anywhere where there's like rotting vegetation.
Yep.
What do you think? Like peat bogs and other stuff like that produce so much. Fart stuff.
Gases. Yeah. So here's another interesting one. This is lightning in a bottle. Transform methane into high demand methanol through breakthrough process. So this is another great breakthrough. By harnessing tiny bursts of plasma or mini lightning bolts in glass tubes submerged in water, chemists have discovered a new way to turn natural gas into liquid fuel. So this is like the next step. Utilizing literal lightning in a bottle, the team from Northwestern University successfully converted methane directly into methanol in a single step. Versatile, high-demand industrial chemical used to make many products people use every day. It's also commonly used as an industrial solvent and is gaining attention as a cleaner burning fuel for ships and industrial boilers. Using just electricity, water, and a copper oxide catalyst, the new process could offer a cleaner electrified path to producing one of the world's most widely used chemical building blocks. The method bypasses the extreme heat and high pressure required for current industrial processes, which blast apart methane and rebuild it as a methanol in a multi-step process. Current method is reliable, but is energy intensive, emits millions of tons of carbon dioxide. The extreme temperatures needed to break down reactive chemical bonds beyond blah, 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 blah. Yeah. Then you use high pressure to squeeze all the molecules together onto the catalyst in order to make the methanol molecule. It works, but it is the most straightforward path. Okay, great. Good news. So this single step process allows us to be a heck of a lot more energy efficient. Methane's unusually stable and difficult to break apart.
Yeah.
So the challenge was not in just starting the reaction, but stopping it at the exactly right moment. So they figured it out with plasma.
Yeah, and you got to create little alcohol chains. So you got to, and it's basically just hydrocarbon chains. So you got to be able to like rip them apart so you can restack them into the nice little alcohol caterpillar.
Yeah, so they're using lightning bolts, which is like doesn't overheat everything. It just
but it
does
gets
enough.
It gets hotter than the surface of the sun momentarily.
Instantaneously. Yeah, so pulses of high voltage electricity. The electrical potential is high enough. Lightning bolts form inside the reactor the way they do during a thunder summer storm. So we're taking advantage of that chemistry to break methane's bonds without heating the entire system to extreme temperatures.
You could probably do this at much lower amperages than direct heating, as far as, like getting the heat from some type of heating coil or some other stuff like that. If you just use real quick, but you can create a spark that's hotter than the surface of the sun by squeezing a quartz crystal. That's what those little clicky lighters are.
Oh, they also ended up with ethylene, precursor to plastic production, and hydrogen gas, important commodity chemical and zero carbon fuel in its own right. So this is brilliant. We took methane, which is a very abundant gas, turned it into methanol along with ethylene, hydrogen, and a bit of propane.
Yeah,
heck yeah, dude.
And
That's awesome.
Propane is CH12, or C4H12. So 4 carbons, 12. I don't know, but it's a larger molecule. It has a little bit more oomph, but it produces a lot more carbon dioxide.
It's cool. So, like the plasma-driven system can enable smaller distributed facilities that use electricity to convert methane into liquid fuels. We could treat standard resources like leaky wellheads that naturally emit methane into the environment. Right now, the way to deal with leaked methane is to light it and on fire and turn it into carbon dioxide, which they say warms the climate, but less methane is anyways. Instead, we take a smaller scale reactor to the place that's leaking methane and turn it into transportable liquid fuel. It's just smart. I love it. Humans are awesome.
Propane is C3H8.
Ah, there you go.
There we go.
All right, Shaw.
Yeah.
Thank you guys so much for tuning in to this episode of Actuali Podcast, our weekly live stream series, Meaning Making 101, where we make sense of this world together. It's every Wednesday, 7 p. EST, as many Wednesdays we can possibly do it. And we are live on YouTube, Twitch, Rumble, X, Facebook, all of the places. Make sure to drop those likes and subscribes and comments, guys. That helps so much. Thank you, everybody, for taking part today. Ninja Bat, Paula. It's great to have you here too, Paulo. So thank you so much, guys, tuning in. And let's go ahead and change this world from the inside out, fam. It's the name of the game. Let's go. Dance our way on out of here.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Just wait for the drop. It's a killer drop. You weren't here for the beginning. We're now. Yeah.